administration, even the PF did assure us to say load shedding has been tackled, especially that with the coming on stream of Kafue Gorge Lower. And we saw the president, Hakainde Hichilema, when he was also taking over, he equally indicated that load shedding is a thing of the past. But today we are speaking something different.
Yes, indeed. The current load shedding, we must put it very clear, has nothing to do with the weather. It has nothing to do with poor rainfall. It is all to do with poor administration, poor management, and poor utilization of water levels in Kariba. We should be very clear. We have not been affected by any drought like we were affected in 2015, 2017, and 2019. If you look at our meteorological information, you will notice that we did not have a drought in 2020, in 2021, and 2022. The forecast for 2023 remains the same. Normal and above normal rainfall pattern. So this current load shedding is just incompetence and mismanagement of our water resource. When the Patriotic Front came to office in 2011, the country had what we call installed capacity of 1,600 megawatts. Yeah. Only 1,600 megawatts. As we stand now, the current installed capacity is over 3,456 megawatts. What did the Patriotic Front do? The Patriotic Front upgraded the small hydro power station and built new power stations. Hence, by 2020, President Edgar Lungu was confident, and he announced when we went to commission one of the first machines at Kafue Gorge Lower that load shedding in Zambia has ended. When President Hakainde Hichilema became president, he said load shedding in Zambia has ended. That was not a lie. That is a statement of fact about our country. So if you look at our national peak demand, when all machines, all powers, the mining sector, their smelters and refineries are working, our power demand, what we call national peak demand, is 2,300 megawatts. The installed capacity, the power we have as a country, is 3,456 megawatts. We have a surplus in excess of 1,200. So load shedding should not take place. Load shedding ended.
Interesting. You are suggesting that actually load shedding did end because of the intervention that the previous administration had put in place in terms of upgrading some power stations as well as increasing the capacity. Now, let's also look at this same problem of load shedding. You are pointing to the aspect of mismanagement. When you talk about mismanagement, do you mean on the power utility side or on the part of the Ministry of Energy or other sector players? Who's supposed to shoulder this blame, Mr. Mwamba?
Yeah, so when we say we have 3,456 megawatts, where does this power come from? So it comes from, let's start with the small hydros, what we call small hydros.
Exactly.
Lunzua power station in Mpulungu was a 0.75 megawatts. It's now 15 megawatts. Chishimba in Kasama was 6 megawatts. It's now 15 megawatts. Musonda Falls was about under a megawatt. It's now 10 megawatts. Lusiwasi 1 and Lusiwasi 2 in Serenje, those have been upgraded to 12 megawatts and 15 megawatts. We built a small power station in Shwangandu, 1 megawatt. Then when we come to the large scale, big power stations, we built the power station at on Kafue River. Kafue River has 3 major power stations. In fact, Kafue River is the largest producer of power. It's no longer Kariba. And let me demonstrate. Because on Kafue River, you have Iteji power station. It produces 120 megawatts. You have Kafue Gorge, the original Kafue Gorge built in the 60s to 70s. It produces 990 megawatts. You have now the one that President Lungu did, the PF did. It's 750 megawatts, Kafue Gorge Lower, which is the installed capacity now of up to 600 megawatts. There's one machine remaining. When we come to Kariba itself, You have to look at the lake. On the south side, Zimbabwe has set up its own power stations. On the north side, Zambia has set up its own power stations. So between them, Zambia produces 1,080 megawatts on the north bank. Zimbabwe produces 1,050 on the south bank for their water. When the PF came into office, there was only Kariba North Bank, which was producing 720 megawatts. The PF installed fresh machines, new machines, and did extension, what we call Kariba North Bank extension, 360 megawatts. That's why it comes now to 1,080 megawatts. So if you look, the country has sufficient power supply. And I insist, it's mismanagement, it's abuse of water resources, poor planning, and appetite for money by exporting the power. What has ZESCO done to mismanage this resource?
Yes.
Every year, like I said, there's no drought the last 3 years. No drought, no reported drought. Annual rainfall above normal. Water levels normal. So what has cost us? Why do we have load shedding? It's because ZESCO and ZESA, the Zimbabwe Power Company, have used more water than they were allocated in the year. Okay? So for ZESCO, because they signed agreements to export power, they announced that they had this excess power of 1,100 megawatts. So there are factors that have allowed us to have a deficit. What are those factors? So we have what we call independent power producers. This is MWAMBA collieries. It produces, it has a thermal energy, chooses thermal energy coal-fired plant. It produces 300 megawatts. MWAMBA collieries is owned by a company from Singapore, Naval Limited, and ZCCMIH, which has shareholding of 35%. It's going through routine maintenance. So 300 megawatts is down there. Ndola Energy, they closed in Ndeni. Ndola Energy feeds off from the feedstock from Ndeni. The leftovers when they refine the crude oil. That leftover heavy fuels is what those jet engines use at Ndola Energy. So Ndola Energy has been down. Ndola Energy produces 110 megawatts. And then the misuse in Kariba, where now they are being forced to shut down, both Zimbabwe and Zambia. You have 1,080 capacity, but because you've utilized all the water, you can't generate that. So last week we saw the statistics. They were generating about 660 megawatts. Last week they said it's now down to 440 megawatts. Today I heard the board chair from ZESCO says we're only now doing 250. So the deficit is artificial. Like I said, poor planning. When independent power producers are going to do maintenance, like MWAMBA collieries, they file a notice a year in advance. So you as ZESCO know which stations will be out when. They just don't wake up and do routine maintenance. I saw both the ministers and the president condemning MWAMBA collieries that how can they do routine maintenance when we have this power shortage. No, the power shortage was not there, was not envisaged. And the notice was given to ZESCO management that we'll be doing routine maintenance because you have to bring experts, you have to buy spares. This thing is done well in advance. And even for MWAMBA, it's not the entire 300 megawatts that's down. Only one machine is being, because they service one and they move to the other. So 150 megawatts is still coming from Livingstone. So for our people, Zambians, they need to know that the current load shedding has nothing to do with number one, drought. There's no drought. It has nothing to do with poor rainfall. There is no poor rainfall the last 3 years. It has everything to do with mismanagement and poor planning. And ZESCO fired over 50 engineers. So they will have no institutional memory. They will have no institutional reference.
Interesting perspective you are bringing out there. But I also want to pick on your perspective on the same issue of MWAMBA collieries regarding the issue of date, because the president was saying we are servicing the date which PF left, and it is also attributed amongst the consequences that we are having in terms of the energy crisis. What would be your perspective on that?
So yes, for ZESCO to do this massive development that was done in the last 10 years. It relied on, foreign financing. Some of it is project finance from China, some from the World Bank, some from Europe. So there are various structures of debt that ZESCO accumulated to do all these power stations, upgrading and building new ones. So the one, for example, at Iteji is a PPP, public-private partnership. So ZESCO has partnered with Tata, a company called Tata, and they borrowed finance to develop that power station, and they're generating power, selling it to ZESCO so they can pay off their loan. Kafue Gorge Lower, project finance from China. China gave us $2.1 billion. A special purpose vehicle has been created for Kafue Gorge Lower, then to generate power, sell to ZESCO, and then pay that debt. So ZESCO, yes, has debt, but it's not irresponsible debt. It's productive debt, and it can be paid for. That is being used as an excuse to export power. Remember, we are exporting power. The managing director signed three contracts just in 2022, the new ZESCO managing director. He signed with Namibia. We've traditionally been exporting about 100 megawatts. They've operated it to 180 megawatts, signed a 10-year agreement. Zimbabwe, they are giving Zimbabwe 100 megawatts, an agreement for 5 years. Botswana, similarly, they are giving Botswana about 70 megawatts. Again, I think a 5-year program. Then you have traditional exports to Malawi. Remember, to Malawi, we export to Malawi, but also Malawi feeds our towns, Lundazi and Chama. We export to Malawi and also import from Malawi. And we also export to DRC. We feed off their mines, literally in Katanga and Kolwezi. We export between 70 megawatts up to 300 megawatts, depending on what DRC wants. And since we upgraded our power station in Imbala, in Mpulungu, Lunzua, it was a very small station. It was just covering Mpulungu and Imbala, but now it's a big station. It's 15 megawatts. So some of it is being exported through the Eastern Power Pool to Sumbawanga, the town across in Tanzania. So yes, there are exports. So government's argument is that with this power deficit, even if Zambians are being load-shedded for 12 hours, we cannot suspend exports.
Exactly.
So for us, we think that is irresponsible. That is
the argument has been that these commitments are binding, and that if Zambia opts out of the agreement, then it may lose trust from those cooperating partners because it may be treated as a non-reliable source of energy.
Where will they get the power from? Where else will they get the power from? What kind of thinking is that? Because it takes 5 to 10 years. You saw under the PF. Yes. That's why people, even here when you open lines, people will say, PF load shed. Because it takes 5 to 10 years to set up capacity. So this capacity you are seeing, it took 10 years for us to have that capacity. Which customer will we lose? Which customer will build the power station in the next 3 months? Because by March, Kariba will be full, and we'll be back to full production. So there is, let me emphasize, there is no contract that is purely binding. No contract is cast in stone. No contract is cast in steel. There is no such thing. So you can suspend your contract.
Yes.
You can exit from your contract. You can cite what we call force majeure. Natural acts of what we call natural acts of God. If you have a disaster, if your dam falls, in this case of low water levels in Kariba, you can cite force majeure. There are many clauses that can allow you to cite and for you to opt out of the contract. For example, just for 3 months, so that your people are not load-shed. You can reduce, instead of giving Namibia 180 megawatts, you can give them 80 megawatts, and you save your people. We know the consumption for the mines, it's over 500 megawatts. For Lusaka, we know the consumption in Lusaka. For northern part of the country, southern part of the country, we know they come to around 1,500. But when the machines, everything is running, that's how it comes to 2,300 peak demand. So we know what we have and the deficit that has been occasioned. We know from our exports that we can tell Congo will just give you 70 megawatts, will not give you 300.
Yeah, but the president has been arguing, Mr. Mwamba, that Zambians need jobs. Zambians need employment. We need to use this money to create the jobs they need. So
do you create jobs by killing jobs? Car wash. I drove to a car wash. Most of them are off, they're not working because there's no power. You go to the barber shop, same story. You go to saloon, same story. You go to welders, you go to tailors. So the small and medium enterprises have been adversely affected. So do you kill jobs to create jobs? That's fallacy. You need to protect the jobs you have and create others. That is why I insist that the current load shedding has nothing to do with natural factors. It's a mismanagement crisis.
With the experience that you have, Mr. Mwamba, especially in communication, do you think Energy Minister is competent and equal to the task, especially that during this time of the crisis?
So I think they've sidelined the Energy Minister. You don't see any authority. Even the optics are not good. I see the president arrive at Kariba, he's with the ZESCO managing director. I see the president arrive at Mamba, he's with the ZESCO managing director. The
problem was that there was bad weather and the chopper for the minister could not land.
At both places.
They had to go back from Mamba. From Mamba, they had to go back.
Let's answer the substantive issue.
Exactly.
There is an institution called Zambezi River Authority. This is a manager of the Zambezi River.
Yes.
It's also the regulator of water usage. It is co-owned by Zambia and Zimbabwe. The board are our energy ministers and associated minister. They form what we call a council of ministers. Then there are permanent secretaries, are the board members. Then they appoint a managing director. The institution is located in Zambia on Chachacha Road, if you have seen Zambezi River.
Yes, exactly.
They have a beautiful building there. The managing director comes from, always in the protocol, comes from Zimbabwe. The deputy comes from Zambia. It's housed here in Zambia. It told both Zambia and Zimbabwe that you've utilized your water for a generation of power for 2022. You've exhausted. They put a notice on August, did a warning that by October, November, you run out of water at the rate you're going. And by November, it was a crisis. They immediately suspended a power generation by Zimbabwe and gave Zambia a notice. So what has this government been doing? From August, when Zambezi River Authority told them that you have no enough water, why didn't they plan? The managing director for ZESCO was actually signing new contracts in August when Zambezi River Authority was issuing that. He was signing new export contracts.
They indicated May.
Yeah.
The warning was also sounded in May, especially for Zimbabwe.
For Zambia, the notice is simultaneous. Zambia generates 1,080, Zimbabwe 1,050. Generation capacity and water utilization is almost the same time. And even this business that Zimbabwe used our water, for me, doesn't make sense. It doesn't make the river comes, it doesn't separate. The water is the same generation capacity. We are even higher by 30 megawatts. So to say that Zimbabwe used our water, for me, it doesn't make sense.
And to say, what would your reaction to the statement that the PF overused the water?
Oh, no, that's just an insult to the collective intelligence of our people. And let's not give dignity to such statements because they're just so bad. It annoys our people. You can't keep on saying the PF. Did the PF drink the water? You know, the PF used the water. There are even false stories. No, the PF installed Chinese machines that are not efficient. They're using more water than before, than the British machine. That's not true. You can take a visit. You were there, you the media.
We understand that.
The machines are efficient, brand new, well kept. And this is scientific and engineering information. They can give you even a schedule of how much water each machine uses per second, per minute, per hour. So these four stories that the machines are Chinese and they're using more water than the British one, come on. Just ask for the engineering details and they'll give you. But coming to the substantive issue, is that this government was warned in May like you stated, in August and in November, warning, big warning, you Zimbabwe shut down. You Zambia scale down from 1,080, come down to 600. Did government communicate? Even as late as last week, the president held a press conference on, first let's track back. The Minister of Energy on 3rd December, before closure of Parliament, 3rd December,
yes,
he comes to the National Assembly, informs the people of Zambia through their House representatives that we are going to have 6-hour load shedding beginning 15th June. When 15th June approaches, the president is in America. He cancels the load shedding. ZESCO issues a load shedding schedule. He cancels the load shedding. On 20th December, the president has a huge press conference, end of year, and he spends a lot of time on load shedding, where he even claims, this is just 2 weeks ago, he claims there will be no load shedding, we have enough power, we will not suspend power exports, and Zambians will not be load shedded. He even asked that question, is there anyone among you who's being load shedded? And all of you kept quiet. So, the communication crisis has been spawned by the president himself, no one else. It has been spawned by the president, no one else.
ZESCO was admitting this morning on one of our radio programs this afternoon to say they misinformed the president on the situation on the ground. Hence, he had rushed to make those pronouncements. What would be your perspective on that?
Yeah, Antonio Mwanza would answer that very well. He would answer. Osafela Chani, Antonio has a saying that usually children suffer for the sins of their father. That's what that board chair, my dear brother, Vixon Nkube, is doing. All of us have the videos when the president says no one will be load shedded, exports will not be done. Even on Kariba, the president just yesterday was saying Kariba is leaking. A false story, a total lie. Kariba has never leaked. What we have is what we call a plunge pool. A plunge pool is when the water comes from the dam, where it spills over. That plunge pool is the one that has issues because it was being eroded and downstream. So the engineer said, although it's not a dam, the plunge pool can affect the integrity of the dam. So it's a plunge pool. If you see at what they are calling the Kariba Rehabilitation Project, $294 million supported by World Bank, Africa Development Bank, and the European Union. If you see what the works that are being done, the spillway gates were built in 1955. That's where you spill over the water when your dam is full. The spillway gates, they are modernizing them. They want them to be automatic. They want to be new ones because I think those are old and manual. So they are putting brand new ones. And the plunge pool, and they've created what is called a cofferdam because the plunge pool where the water spills over has been, is undergoing rehabilitation. So they've created what they call a cofferdam downstream, so that if there is any spillage, it is housed in a dam that our people downstream, from Kariba, Siavonga, up to Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, are not affected. So the works that are going there have nothing to do with the dam, that the dam has cracks. The dam has never had any crack. We should make that very clear. But the president was on record claiming that the dam was on cracks.
Interesting. Well, our dear viewers, you are watching The People's Verdict with me, Patrick Soko, and my guest is Mr. Emmanuel MWAMBA. He is the presidential hopeful for the Patriotic Front and Zambia's major opposition political party. And in case you have any questions or contributions to the program, you can do so by calling us on the number that is on your screen, as well as leave us a message on our Facebook page, Kamne TV Zambia. We can get interacting. Our topic of discussion once again is tackling the Zambia's energy crisis. Quite a number of issues have emerged on the program. You can still follow on our Facebook page and catch up in case you've missed the first part of the deliberations. And now, proceeding now with our discussion, Mr. Mwamba, before I ask you this other question, I would also want you to speak directly to the President's perspective on this subject of load shedding during the trip to Mamba, where he did address the media and also made some comments. So we're going to play that story that was done by Sharon Karimbula, then we'll be back on the other side. Keep it on Camnet.
Mamba Collieries in the heart of Southern Province is the second largest power producer in the country. It produces about 300 megawatts of power and contributes about 216 to ZESCO's main grid. Now, since its routine maintenance, which are done twice a year, this time around it has reduced its power generation to 150. This has led to the increase in load management by the power utility company ZESCO. Late 2022, ZESCO announced a 6-hour load management schedule. But earlier this year, with only less than 10 days in 2023, it has increased the load management schedule to 12 hours. This development has angered many sectors, especially those who deal in small and medium enterprises. Stakeholders have raised their voices on this, owing to the fact that President Hakainde Hichilema, during his time as opposition leader, made a clarion call every time he touched the podium to say, once given an opportunity to be in government, he will end load shedding. This has prompted him to move out of his comfort zone to come here in Mamba to ascertain exactly what is happening. Yesterday at State House, he convened a meeting with energy sector players where he wanted to ascertain the reasons why Mamba Collieries goes for these routine maintenance works, and specifically at this time of the year when the water levels are low.
To Mamba, accelerate the work you are doing. I repeat what I said, an extra hour saved, bring the asset into full production is key. Can save a child on oxygen in a hospital. Because if power went off, the oxygen machine will go off if there's no standby power, and we could lose a life.
President Hichilema also touched on the rumors that are circulating on social media that Mamba Collieries has reduced its power generation due to the date owed by ZESCO. He says that the two institutions have reached an agreement and business is going on strong.
Our first goal is the domestic market demand. It's the people of Zambia. But the very people of Zambia require jobs, those who are not employed, and hence we have to export. It's a question of balancing the two. They are both necessary.
During the same meeting, Energy Regulation Board informed the gathering that maintenance works here at Mamba Collieries have reduced from 16 days to at least a minimum number to ensure that generation of power is restored to full capacity. Sharon Kalimbula, Camnet News, Mamba Collieries Power Generation Plant in Southern Province.
Well, there you have it. That was Sharon Kalimbula's report at Mamba Collieries. Quite interesting views are coming out of that report, Mr. Mwamba. And I would want you to speak to that subject, especially the same people, Mr. Mwamba, you are complaining, but when the government fails to provide jobs, you'll be on the neck of the government to say there's high unemployment levels in the country.
The consequence of load shedding, and in this case 12-hour load shedding, is extremely dangerous for our people. You make them bankrupt, and like we say, if it's at hospitals, let's take for UTH.
Yes.
UTH as industrial boreholes, you can't power UTH power water with, there's no such thing. You have to pump water. So when there is load shedding, UTH will not have water. Before you talk about electricity, before you talk about oxygen, theaters will be affected. I recognize that ZESCO has said they will try as much as possible to give emergency power to hospitals and clinics, but that's just usually lip service. So the consequence of lack of power is very serious for our people.
Interesting. Now, I also want so you also ruled out the fact that it is no longer a water crisis like it was in the past, but it has to do with mismanagement. Now, also, there's been an aspect of the president calling for foreign direct investment in the energy sector, and he points out that solar energy as is one vehicle government can utilize to address this load shedding, probably in the next 6 months or so. What would be your comment on the aspect of bringing more investors, especially in the energy sector, and considering that the current tariff that we have, which is they say is too low for ZESCO and does not attract foreign investment?
No, it doesn't, for one reason or another. We have Kariba, we have Kafiwe, and other old power stations that have already been paid for, and our power is produced very, very cheaply for our people. The investors think that ZESCO charges a very low price, and they want our people to pay more, what they call cost-reflective tariffs. Recently, there was what is called a cost of service study that was commissioned by Energy Regulation Board that has said there should be an increment of electricity tariffs, 17% a year for the period of 5 years, to bring these prices to what they call cost reflective, that our people can pay far higher than they are paying. Therefore, this will attract investment. How does this work? For example, MWAMBA Collieries is generating power at a very expensive price and sells it to ZESCO at very expensively. But ZESCO sells that power to you and me and to the mines at a cheaper rate. So ZESCO is continuously making losses in relation to these independent power producers. Solar, yes, solar, we've demonstrated. We built Bangweulu Solar Power Station in the Lusaka Mount Facility Zone. You can visit there. We built Ngonye, it's a joint venture with the private sector. Ngonye solar farms in the Lusaka Mount Facility Zones, and they're producing 54 megawatts and 34 megawatts. That's about 90, about under just 100. The president is talking about, yes, let's have these investments to quickly have power, more power stations online, especially solar. Our caution is that ZESCO should never be made to buy power that expensively again, because ZESCO can't afford it. What it means is the people of Zambia are the ones subsidizing these independent power producers. It should not be like that. And sadly, and conversely, ZESCO sells power to CEC, Copper Belt Energy Corporation, at very low price. And Copper Belt Energy price as a middleman then sells to the mines at higher price and makes a huge, huge paper profit.
The status quo was not changed under the previous administration, Mr. Mwamba, despite you observing this critical aspect.
You know, one of the reasons I aspire to be a leader in this country is exactly that. I just do not understand how we make Zambia lose. I don't understand how we make agreements that disadvantage our country. Whether it's in the mining sector, whether it's in the energy sector, whether it's in the agricultural sector. Most of the agreements are to the detriment of our people. It should never be like that. So whether that was done under the PF or under the UPND, a wrong remains a wrong. And there has to be a leadership that should correct those wrongs.
Interesting. So what would be the way forward to avoid arrangement like the one ZESCO has with CEC in terms of, for instance, because they have an infrastructure developed at CEC and ZESCO has to ride on that. And we saw the previous administration trying to address that very issue. But at the moment, we don't know the way forward, the policy direction regarding the same subject, Mr. Mwamba. But how should we bring this matter to a logical conclusion?
So first of all, diverse our power sources. So do what we call an energy mix. So other than hydro, which we are endowed in, which is very good, and we have to keep on developing it because that's our biggest advantage. We have water. 40% of water in Southern Africa is in Zambia, both surface, underground water. We have plenty of water. So we should continue to utilize hydro. Coal, we have reserves of coal of over 80 million. This translates to 270 years of exploitation of that coal. In Mamba, in Sinazongwe, we can set up power stations there to complement hydro. It can even overtake hydro. I know there are climate change issues where people are saying, no, abandoned coal is a dirty energy, but you have to be aware that even in Europe they are switching on, they are fighting with Russia and Ukraine, and they switched on the old coal machines. So here is a necessity. We're a country under development. We can do that. Solar, we have 3,000 of hours every year of of sunshine. So why can't we exploit solar? But solar can't form what they call a base load, because solar is unstable. When it's raining, the power generation goes down. When there's cloud cover in winter, power generation goes down. In the night, it doesn't produce. So what you produce with solar is highly unstable. It is good. It can give you, because it stores the power in the batteries and it powers, supplies in your transmission lines, but it's not very stable. What is baseload? Baseload is like what ZESCO has, hydro, coal. Those are, you know that you are controlling all the factors. And in this country, we have uranium, which is mined in northwestern province. Uranium is a critical ingredient in nuclear power stations. You can put up a nuclear power station. That's why you can find a country like Japan, small country, it produces 10, I have to look at the numbers. But the numbers are like what the entire Africa consumes. Why? Because of 1 or 2 nuclear power stations. So with nuclear, you can set up and it can produce your entire capacity in the country under just one machine. It's expensive, but it's worthy an investment because you have uranium. So you process it under nuclear and you have a power station and it can give you 10,000 megawatts, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 megawatts. It's something that we can consider in the long term. Biomass, using sewer, methane, and other things. We can also supplement it with the energy, with the agricultural sector. That's also another issue. So medium to long term energy mix.
Yes.
So that if one is down because of climate change issues, the other one complements. And the president kept on referring to all this. He toured MWAMBA, he toured Kariba, and he came back and he still load shedded us for 12 hours. I was totally disappointed.
But they even said that they have made it in portions of 6 hours.
How? 6
so
plus 6 equals what?
In the morning.
6 plus 6 equals what?
But the schedule, are you not comfortable with the schedule?
No, you're not. It's just highly disruptive. First of all, we're not supposed to load shed our people 12 hours. It should be minimum 3 hours under the current arrangements. Like I said, you can reduce exports, you can balance the exports and ensure that Lusaka, Copperbelt and the farmers are fed, and this load shedding shouldn't even take place like I've stated.
Yes.
And it's just for a short period, because Kariba is coming online by March.
My last question on the energy sector, Mr. Mwamba, would be that President Hichilema, during his end-of-year press conference, did indicate that he has been the bravest of the presidents. Previously, others did not take the courage to ensure that the country moves towards cost-effective tariffs, in that ZESCO is likely to adjust the tariffs upwards for this year, and that also the connection fees, which were very low according to this administration, and ZESCO was highly subsidizing the consumers, and that the president has been brave enough, which the PF, the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy, MMD, UNIP, all failed to do during the tenure they saved in government.
So when the president begins to boast, you switch off, because after that, he doesn't tell the truth when he's boasting. The PF have just demonstrated, upgraded power stations, built new power stations. Many Zambians are knowing about it now. They thought the PF just built schools and hospitals and roads and created dams. They were not aware that the PF did this massive investment in the energy sector. And sadly, to the PF's own mistake, they never sang the songs. When the President when he just wakes up, the way he praises himself, as if it's the first time a president is waking up, the PF were quiet. So the PF did adjust tariffs in 2018 and 2019, if you remember, to try to move them to cost-reflective. They also staggered them for a period of 5 years, that the cost-reflective tariffs have to migrate to in a period of 5 years. You just can't impose. And so his predecessors have made harder decisions. They've made more expensive decisions like he has. They've committed and invested, not in speeches, but in infrastructure.
Interesting. Now, I also want to take advantage, as someone who understands international relations, on this subject matter pertaining to Zambia and China relation, also the aspect of the United States. Let's look at that aspect so far. What would be your perspective on how this administration is handling diplomacy around China-USA issues?
So the world is not a unipolar world. It doesn't belong to the US alone. And the US is not the only major power in the world. It's not the only superpower in the world. You have Russia, you have China, you have larger states like France and UK. You have other emerging countries like India, Brazil, South Africa, Nigeria. So your outlook should be global in perspective, should be multipolar in your approach. You should relate with both parties, with all the parties. So to lean on one side is a terrible international and diplomatic blunder.
You feel the European is leaning on the one side?
In the US, how many times has the president been to the US? They recently signed an agreement which many Africans have condemned, where they've locked away the electric vehicle battery value chain to US, because the agreement has been signed by the United States, Zambia, and DRC, that they'll set up these battery project in Zambia. And that agreement, we've demanded for full disclosure. We want to know, what does it say? Do you say that copper, cobalt, uranium, lithium, manganese will only go to the US government and US companies? Does it mean that you'll adopt American technologies? What does the MOU you signed stated? We need to know. So on the economy is in a crisis. Cost of living is the highest it has ever been in the last 30 years. Price of fuel, the highest you've ever seen.
But the government is bragging over a 2% to 3% growth in the year 2022.
Yes, the growth has always been there. You know, even amidst poverty, we've been posting growth sometimes up to 10%. It means nothing. You can post. The only time Zambia has ever posted a negative growth was in 2020 when we had COVID. So economic growth must translate to food on the table, to economic scale of our people, to employment creation, our jobs. Our people should be employed. Our people should eat 3 meals a day. Then economic growth will make sense. And 2%, 4%, 3% growth is nothing. It can't take you anywhere. The best statistics are from China. You have to grow above 10% for a period of 20 to 30 years to make meaningful impact on poor people. So if you are doing 2%, is nothing. So we have a huge crisis. And what is a crisis? Why is this government battling debt? We have a huge foreign debt of 14.2 billion.
Which they would say the PF left.
Yes, because even the power they built, the hospitals they built, you can relate the debt to the projects. But that's not the point. The point is you have a debt, and you want to restructure the debt. You want the debt cancelled. You want the debt rescheduled. Who is your biggest creditor? It's China. Why hasn't the president visited China? The numerous trips is made to Europe and to the US should have been to China, so that China then cancels our debt, reschedules our debt, writes off some of our debts. China is a no-weather friend. They built the Tazara when they were a poor country, one of the largest infrastructure development in the world at the time. So China are all-weather friend, and we should accord them adequate respect. You can't just lean on, or you go to the White House, you go to the UN, you go to Washington again to sign agreements. You cannot do that. Where is your visit to China?
Is there any consequences for such maneuvers?
Here, the IMF deal has failed to take off, because the IMF are waiting for a creditors committee to resolve issues. IMF is impatient. They want you to pay back the loans. That's their interest. So for you to pay back the loans, for them to give you money, you need to begin to service your debt. Honorable Wariangandu suspended debt service. They called it default. But Zambia was among 48 countries that suspended debt service because of the COVID and COVID crisis. So we haven't been paying debt for the last 3 years. We've accumulated arrears in excess of over $1.3 $3 billion because we are not servicing. These are just debt service interest. The reliance by the new Dawn government is that they are going to get a debt write-off, so therefore they will not have need to pay for these debts and even the debt arrears. So they can't solve all these problems without going to China. Hence, China becomes very important.
Interesting. But is there still room or time for us to rectify that
Yes. Engage China. Engage China aggressively. Now we are engaging US and getting returns and commitments from the US. We should do the same. We should copy from Dr. Kaunda. He used a non-aligned process. Dr. Kaunda ensured that his approach was non-aligned. He was comfortable in Washington, in New York. He was comfortable in London. He was comfortable in Moscow. He was comfortable in Peking at the time.
So do you think Zambia is now aligned?
President Hakainde Hichilema has abandoned the non-aligned policy by his heavy reliance to the United States.
I also want to get your perspective. You talked about the aspect of the economy not translating into tangible benefit, especially to ordinary citizens. I want to also get your perspective. This government has been driving the agenda through and through under the Constituency Development Fund, CDF, which for this year is 28.3%, million kwacha rather. And they feel this is a game changer in terms of steering development at grassroots level. So far, based on your assessment and how we implemented the previous CDF in 2022, what would you say about this fund? Is it really significant and bringing out tangible benefits to this country?
So there are concerns around CDF. It's a good idea. You decentralize resources. That's what we've all called for.
Yes.
That we need decentralization. We need a devolved system where decisions are made on the ground and payments are made on the ground. Everything doesn't have to come to Lusaka. As permanent secretary, I don't know how many trips I would make to Lusaka. So the purpose of decentralization is that both resources and decisions should be made at local level. So you build capacity at local level. What's wrong with this current CDF? It's just paper money. That is why the Ministry of Finance has released in full the 2022 CDF money, but only 4% has been used. If you've seen only the money for grants, you saw those MPs distributing those payments to cooperatives. And some MPs have just gotten a quotation and bought a yellow machine, what we call a yellow machine, a grader. So now which constituency is buying a grader? But meaningful development of that money has not taken place. No infrastructure has taken place. They are saying they'll buy desks, there's a process. It remains in a mess and the money remains on paper because only 4% has been utilized at the moment.
Interesting perspectives there on the Constituency Development Fund, that's the CDF. We are talking about the things I'm now pointing out to you are what they deem as progressive under this administration. And that's the other arrangement is under the free education policy, which they say they have done it better compared to the PF. We understand that there was a reduction in terms of school fees, which pupils were compelled to pay. But then they fully implemented the free education policy up to secondary level. What is your perspective so far? Do you think it's a progressive policy and they have achieved on this?
Yeah, CDF, free education, employment of these civil servants are all welcome policy, but there are a lot of things that have to be done, a lot of teething problems that have to be done. Free education means that you as government have to fund the administration of those schools. And the money released under 2022 was totally inadequate because these schools had far higher budgets from the user fees they used to collect, those 100 and 200 kwacha per term, 600 kwacha a year. Used to help the schools to run the schools, pay for water, electricity, and hire a guard, and pay clerical staff. All that is not there. So the administration of the schools have suffered. Government has been releasing administrative fund, but it's very, very little. If you look at the schedule, I once published it, sometimes it's 1,000 kwacha at a primary school for a period of 3 months. What can you do with 1,000 kwacha for 3 months? So those are the current teething problems with the free education policy, government has to look at all the concerns of the administrators, school administrators, the running of the schools, also the welfare of the schools. You just can't push children in schools where there are no desks, where there are no classrooms. You have not expanded the classrooms. The PF did. 14,000 classrooms were expanded. You have not expanded the classrooms. So you need to expand the classrooms, employ more teachers, give them administrative fee. You have to fund. Because remember, free education is to the user. To schools, it costs a lot to run that free education policy. So we are simply shifting the burden to government for government to fund that education process.
What would you term a public good? Let's say a free education. We also have the issue of electricity. Don't you think governments have to also make sure that they equally subsidize their citizens? Does everything has to be cost reflective?
No. For us, we support, productive subsidies. We support the welfare of our people. Social cash transfer, where you give actual cash to poor and vulnerable people. That's an empowerment policy. Where primary school was free. We should remember that. Primary education was free. It's only secondary school and boarding schools that were paying that 200 kwacha and 1,000 kwacha. So we recognize the welfare of our people, that we're a poor country. I mean, we have a poor people as a country, and there are certain things government has to do. The welfare of our people comes first. But whatever we do, don't compromise on quality. Don't compromise on standards. Ensure that it's something that benefits and helps our people, not something that destroys our people. Like the FISIP program.
Yes.
Where they've destroyed the FISIP program.
We have the CASP now.
Yeah.
The Comprehensive Agriculture Program.
Nothing. It's still a FISIP program, and even in their nomenclature, they haven't changed. They still call it FISIP. And the Comprehensive Agriculture Support Program is supposed to be different. There's nothing different. Here they are. They have not delivered fertilizer. You saw the other day, our farmers from Mukushi were protesting that they still haven't received fertilizer. And that's a story across the country. And fertilizer came late, not inadequate. We have armyworms that have broken out in parts of Lusaka and Eastern Province. There's no formal announcement. There are no mitigation measures. We will have crop failure, and our people will suffer a lot, especially the smallholder farmers that depend on support from under the FISIP program, because they only get their income once a year. So you've disrupted that income. So other than threatening food security and literally preparing for food shortages, you've made our farmers, smallholder farmers, poor.
Interesting. As we come towards the end of our discussion this evening, Mr. Mwamba, I also want to get your perspective on, you've said quite a number of issues pertaining to governance in general of our country. Now, given an opportunity that you are given a mandate to run the affairs of the PF, and eventually given an opportunity to govern the country, how different would you do things?
Corruption. I will not be corrupt. I will not respond to issues of corruption. I will be very strict on issues of corruption. I will not abandon our people for the benefit of big businesses or certain countries. Our people come first, citizen first. So our policies should be that they are driven to serve our people. And you bring a leadership where leaders don't lie. It has become natural and normal for leaders to lie. You say what you don't mean. You promise, even abandon what you promise and don't even apologize for it. This will raise confidence in our people. Every time I go to radio or TV, they tell me, but no.
Give me a mandate, Mr. Amnesia develops, Mr. Mwamba.
Yeah.
What happens?
Erosion of confidence in our people is a conduct of our leaders. It has nothing to do with our people. Our people trust us. Our people give us power. And then we abuse the trust and do something else. I totally want to be different.
Your concluding remarks.
We thank Cabinet and Cabinet management, and to our, our pastor and madam. Thank you for the opportunity, and to you guys, to our dear listeners, we thank you. God bless you. God bless this country. We shall succeed as a country. This country is a very wealthy country. There's no reason to have our people poor. There's absolutely no reason. And like I said, there's no need for load shedding. We have adequate power. There's no need for this current load shedding. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.
There you have it. That is Emmanuel Mwamba, the PF aspiring president, giving us his perspective on various national matters, especially on the issue of the energy crisis. I hope you managed to follow the proceedings of the program. Until next week, when we come with another interesting episode of The People's Verdict, this has been Patrick Soko. Keep it on Camnet TV. Remember, Camnet TV is not just another channel.